The Galactic Council Chamber was the heart of peace in the galaxy. For thousands of years, it had stood as a symbol of unity. Inside that vast hall, representatives of countless species gathered under one law. The chamber itself was enormous, shaped like a great circle, with floating seats arranged in tiers, each glowing faintly with the colors of its people. Voices of many languages often filled the air, but here, with the help of translation waves, every word was understood by all. For centuries, wars had been stopped before they began. No empire dared to strike another openly, for to break the Council's law meant facing the combined will of the galaxy. That system had kept balance for ages. Civilizations rose and fell, but the Council remained. It was not perfect, but it was the closest thing the galaxy had to peace. And then, a new species arrived. Humanity. They were a small species from a blue planet called Earth, far from the galactic center. The Council had heard of them only recently, when their ships began to travel beyond their sun. At first, they seemed insignificant, young, untested, carrying scars of their own wars back on their homeworld. Compared to ancient civilizations, humanity was like a child taking its first steps. But there was something in their eyes, something in their voices, that unsettled the elder races. Humans were curious, yes, but also bold. They asked too many questions, they explored places most species avoided, and they spoke as if they belonged among the stars. Some races admired them, calling them dreamers of fire and iron. Others feared them, whispering that humans carried too much hunger in their hearts. Within the council chamber, debates about humanity grew louder with each passing season. "They are reckless," hissed the Thyran delegate, a creature of scaled skin and golden eyes. "They expand too quickly. They build fleets not for exploration, but for war." "Nonsense," replied the Illyri ambassador, her voice soft and musical. "They are simply ambitious. Did we not all seek the stars when our time came? Humanity is no different." But others were not so sure. The Veari Dominion's representative, tall and armored in gleaming plates, let out a cold laugh. "Ambitious? They are dangerous. They fight even among themselves. Entire nations of humans have turned on each other, again and again. If they cannot live in peace with their own kind, how can they live in peace with us?" Whispers spread across the chamber. Some agreed. Others frowned. Humanity had indeed come from a violent past. Wars, revolutions, and endless conflict had shaped their history. Yet, despite all of that, or perhaps because of it, they had survived. They had risen from their ruins again and again, stronger each time. And that was what unsettled the council most. For in humanity, they did not only see violence. They saw resilience. One by one, reports came from explorers and merchants who had met humans. Some spoke of their warmth, their strange humor, their ability to form bonds with alien races that others ignored. A human could share a drink with a warrior from across the stars and call him friend. But others carried darker tales. They spoke of human soldiers who fought until the last breath, who refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. They told of human engineers who built weapons faster than most species could even design them. And they whispered of human leaders who, once their hearts were set on a goal, never let it go. The council listened. They measured, they judged, and yet they did not act. For now, humanity was small. One world, a handful of colonies, a few fleets. What could they truly do against empires that stretched across the stars? The Veari Dominion was the loudest voice of doubt. They mocked humanity in every session, calling them children playing at empire. Their delegate often laughed when human ambassadors spoke. "Let them bark," he sneered once. "They are too weak to bite." But others were less certain. The Illyri ambassador, who had watched humans closely, warned the council. "Do not mistake their smallness for weakness. Fire may begin as a spark, but left unchecked, it can burn forests to ash." Still, her words were ignored. The council turned its eyes elsewhere, to border disputes, trade agreements, ancient rivalries that never seemed to end. Humanity remained a curiosity, nothing more. Yet, in the quiet corners of the chamber, whispers grew. Some began to ask dangerous questions. What if humanity rose faster than expected? What if their hunger for the stars could not be contained? What if, one day, they marched not as diplomats, but as warriors? Few dared to speak these thoughts aloud. But in the hearts of the oldest species, unease began to take root. For the galaxy had seen many young races before. Some burned brightly and then vanished. Others grew slowly, joining the council without question. But humanity was different. Their spirit carried a weight, a storm waiting to break. And though the council chamber stood calm, though the voices still spoke of peace, an unspoken truth lingered like a shadow across the hall. The galaxy had never seen a species quite like humanity. And if one day the fire inside them turned to rage, the council might not be ready. The galaxy did not fall into chaos in one night. Wars rarely begin with thunder, they begin with whispers, then small fires, and finally, the storm. For humanity, that storm came from arrogance, an arrogance not their own, but from one of the oldest and proudest empires, the Vayari Dominion. The Vayari had always hated humanity. To them, Earth was a noisy, restless world, filled with reckless creatures who dared to stand tall among giants. The Dominion had ruled stars for thousands of years, carving empires from fire and steel. They saw humans as insects, useful for trade, perhaps, but too proud for their own good. So the Vayari decided to teach them a lesson. It happened on the colony world Erivos Prime, one of humanity's youngest settlements. A green planet with wide oceans and endless plains, it was home to 5 million men, women, and children. They were farmers, builders, and dreamers, not soldiers. Erivos Prime was humanity's hope, a place where families believed their children would grow under new suns, free from the shadows of Earth's long wars. But the Dominion did not see that hope. They saw resources, ore, gas, fertile soil. And so they came with fire. One morning, without warning, the skies above Erivos darkened. Shadows fell across the cities as massive Vayari warships entered orbit. The colony sent frantic messages to Earth, desperate calls for help, but the distance between stars is vast, and no human fleet was near. Then, the bombardment began. Flames rained from the sky. Towers crumbled, oceans boiled, and fields turned to ash. Millions screamed as their homes burned. Families tried to flee into shelters, but the Dominion showed no mercy. To them, humans were not equals. They were pests to be crushed. Within 3 days, Erivos Prime was silent. The news spread like wildfire across human space. Images of burning cities, of mothers clutching lifeless children, of fathers screaming against the storm, these images seared themselves into the hearts of every human alive. Earth wept. Colonies wept. And as the grief spread, so too did rage. The Galactic Council gathered quickly. The hall that once carried calm debate now shook with angry voices. "This is an outrage," cried the Illyri ambassador, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow. "The Dominion has broken the most sacred law. They attacked without cause, without warning." The Vayari delegate only shrugged. His armor gleamed under the chamber's lights, his voice cold and sharp. "We acted because humans grew too bold. Their colonies expand too quickly. Erivos Prime was a threat to stability. We did what had to be done." "Threat," shouted another ambassador. "They were farmers and children." But the Dominion did not bend. They argued that humanity had provoked them, that humans were reckless, that they brought war upon themselves. And to humanity's horror, the Council hesitated. Compensation was offered. Promises of future protection were made. But no punishment came. The Council spoke of balance, of compromise, of avoiding greater wars. To them, the loss of a single colony was tragedy, but not enough to risk galaxy-wide conflict. The human ambassador sat in silence as these words filled the chamber. His hands trembled. His voice, when it finally came, was low but heavy. "You ask us to forgive. You ask us to move on. You ask us to forget the screams of our children as they burned." The chamber grew quiet. Even the Dominion delegate lowered his eyes for a moment, though not from guilt, only from the weight of the human's rage. "We will not forget," the ambassador said. "We cannot forgive. If this council will not act, then humanity will." He left the chamber without another word. For a moment, the council remained frozen in silence. Some felt shame. Others felt fear. A few even felt pity. But none truly understood what had just been born in that silence. On Earth, grief turned to steel. Factories that had long been silent roared to life. The same industries that once built starliners now forged warships. Old designs, once shelved in the name of peace, were pulled out and reworked with furious hands. Across the colonies, volunteers lined up in millions. Farmers laid down their tools and picked up rifles. Students left their studies to join the Navy. Mothers kissed their sons goodbye with tears in their eyes, knowing they might never return. It did not matter that humanity's fleets were small compared to the empires of the galaxy. It did not matter that their weapons were outdated. What mattered was the fire in their hearts. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw a species rise not for conquest, not for greed, but for justice. And the words of humanity spread like thunder. We march to war, not for empire, not for glory, but for our dead. For Erivo's prime. For our children. The council had seen many young races rise before. Some burned out, some joined the fold quietly. But humanity was different. Humanity had been wounded. And in that wound, a storm was born. The Dominion thought they had silenced humanity with fire. Instead, they had awakened something the galaxy had never seen before. The march had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same. The fires of Erivo's prime still burned in human memory. Every family, every colony, every soul carried the weight of that massacre. Children drew pictures of burning skies in classrooms. Songs of grief were whispered in crowded streets. Humanity had always known loss, but this loss was different. It was not their own hand that caused it, but the hand of an empire that thought them weak. And so, grief became fury. Fury became resolve. On Earth, leaders gathered in the great assembly hall. They were not kings or emperors, but men and women chosen by their people. They had no crowns, only weary faces marked with sorrow. Before them stood the human ambassador who had walked out of the Galactic Council. His voice trembled with anger, but it was steady with determination. "They burned our children," he said. "They thought we would kneel. They thought we would accept their silver, their empty promises. But we are not a people who forget. We are not a people who bow." The chamber fell silent as his words echoed. Around him, generals stood in dark uniforms, their eyes heavy with both pride and fear. They knew what was coming. They knew the cost. And yet, no one turned away. Factories that once built civilian ships now thundered with war. Sparks flew, machines roared, and shipyards across the solar system filled with the skeletons of new vessels. Old designs, meant only for defense, were reforged with stronger armor, heavier cannons, and faster engines. Engineers worked without sleep, driven by rage and duty. In the colonies, the call spread like wildfire. Farmers put aside their plows. Miners left their tunnels. Students abandoned their classrooms. One by one, they lined up before recruiting stations. Millions of volunteers filled the ranks. They were not born soldiers, but they carried something deeper than training: love for their families, anger for their dead, and an unbreakable will. Posters appeared across Earth and the colonies, each carrying the same words. "For Erivos. For humanity. We will rise." The rallying cry spread further. On cold mining stations in the asteroid belt, workers painted human flags on metal walls. On Mars, soldiers trained in the dust, whispering names of lost friends before battle drills. Even on distant outposts near barren moons, families sent what little they had, food, fuel, even their savings, to feed the growing fleets. The council watched with unease. Ambassadors whispered in hidden corners. Humanity was not acting like other young species. Most races, when struck, begged for peace. But humans prepared for war with a fury that seemed limitless. "They cannot hope to win," muttered the Thyran delegate, shaking his scaled head. "They are too small. Their fleets are nothing compared to the Dominions." Yet, even as he spoke, reports arrived, shipyards on Earth working day and night, colonies pledging resources, millions already trained and ready. It was madness, yes, but it was madness with purpose. Meanwhile, the Dominion mocked them. Their broadcasts filled the galaxy with laughter. "Let the humans scream," their admirals sneered. "They build toys and call them warships. They gather farmers and call them soldiers. We will crush them as easily as we did before." But even as those words echoed, a human fleet gathered near Jupiter. Small, yes. Weak by galactic standards, perhaps. But every ship carried something alien admirals could never measure: vengeance, courage, and the unyielding spirit of survival. Mothers wept as they watched their sons and daughters board those ships. Fathers placed medals from old Earth wars into their children's hands, whispering, "Come back with honor." Families embraced in silence, holding each other tightly before the long departure. No one knew if they would return. But everyone knew why they were leaving. On the day the first fleet departed, Earth stood still. Millions gathered across cities to watch as the warships rose into the sky. Engines thundered, leaving trails of fire behind them. Children waved flags from rooftops. Old veterans saluted with trembling hands. The President of Earth spoke from the central tower of New Geneva. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glistened with tears. "We do not march for conquest," she said. "We do not march for empire. We march for justice. We march for every voice silenced on Erivo's prime. We march for every child who never saw tomorrow. And we march so that no one, no human, no alien, will ever suffer such loss again." Her words burned like fire in every human heart. Across the colonies, across the fleets, across the farthest stations, people repeated her message in whispers, in songs, in tears. We march for justice. The rallying cry of humanity was no longer just grief. It was no longer just anger. It was a promise, a vow to the galaxy itself. And though the Dominion laughed, though the Council trembled in doubt, humanity did not care. They had made their choice. The march to war had begun. And in the silence of space, beneath the stars that had always seemed so far away, the galaxy waited. Some with fear, some with hope. For the Council had long believed that no young race could ever shake the balance of power. But now, as human warships vanished into the dark, carrying with them the dreams and fury of billions, a single thought lingered in every mind. What if humanity succeeds? The human fleets moved silently through the void, a small but determined force against the vast dominion of the Vayari. Their ships were not as large, not as heavily armed, not as advanced as the enemy. But they carried something no machine could measure, the fire of a people who had lost everything and would not bow. The first sight of the Dominion fleet struck terror in the hearts of many humans. Hundreds of ships, bristling with weapons, surrounded them like a storm waiting to crush them. On the bridge of the flagship Resolute, Captain Elena Torres gripped the controls, her knuckles white. She glanced at her crew, young soldiers, barely trained, their eyes wide but resolute. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We fight together. We protect each other. We survive." The first shots rang out like thunder in space. Laser beams carved paths through the darkness. Explosions tore into smaller human vessels, sending debris spinning into the void. Yet, the humans held their formation, trading fire with precision. Every ship that fell was avenged by the ones behind it. Every attack was met with determination, every retreat turned into a counterstrike. Alien admirals watched in disbelief. "How?" muttered the Dominion commander. "They should have broken by now. They are too few, too weak." But the humans were not weak. They were unstoppable in ways the Dominion could not understand. On one small cruiser, Lieutenant Yarrick sang softly to himself, a lullaby his mother had sung when he was a child. Around him, soldiers braced for impact. The Dominion ship fired a devastating beam. Yarrick's ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring. But even as sparks flew and hull plates bent, he aimed their cannons and fired back, hitting the enemy vessel in a critical engine. It exploded. Yarrick looked out the viewport at the blazing wreckage. He thought of Erivo's prime. He thought of his own family. And he whispered, "For them." Across the battlefront, other stories unfolded. Engineers on crippled ships repaired systems with fingers scorched by sparks. Pilots steered burning vessels into enemy lines, sacrificing themselves to save their fleet. Medical crews ran into danger zones to rescue wounded comrades. Every act of bravery, every sacrifice, pushed humanity forward. And yet, the Dominion had numbers, experience, and firepower. The humans were battered, their losses mounting, and still, they refused to retreat. The Council watched in horrified fascination. Never before had a species fought like this. Not for territory, not for power, but for a deep, unyielding cause. The humans' courage was raw, emotional, and terrifying. Some ambassadors whispered among themselves, "This is not war as we know it. This is something else. Something unstoppable." On Earth, families listened to the battle updates via transmission feeds. Mothers held children close as reports came of human ships holding off entire fleets. Fathers clenched their fists as they learned of pilots who refused to abandon their comrades, even when the odds were impossible. Humanity's spirit spread across the planet like wildfire. People wept, cheered, and prayed all at once. In the midst of the fighting, Captain Torres spotted a massive Vayari flagship advancing toward the human center. Its weapons glowed, a storm ready to annihilate her fleet. "Target their command ship," she ordered. "Focus fire. Do not let them break our line." The human fleet moved as one, dodging, weaving, and striking. Smaller vessels acted as shields for larger ones, carrying fire back at the enemy. Engineers worked tirelessly to keep engines running, weapons firing, and shields intact. Every human knew the cost of failure. Every human knew that the world, or worlds, they fought for depended on their courage. The first great clash ended in a moment that no Dominion soldier would forget. The Vayari flagship erupted in fire, its hull ripped apart by coordinated human strikes. The enemy fleet faltered. Confusion spread through the Dominion ranks. Humans cheered quietly over comms, whispering names of lost friends, whispering we did it. We survived, for now. It was not a complete victory. Many ships had been lost. Many humans would never return home. But the Dominion had learned something vital. Humanity could not be crushed. Their courage was unshakable. Their will was relentless. Even the Council could not ignore it. Ambassadors whispered in fear. They are not like other races, one said. They do not fight for power. They fight for life. For justice. For something we cannot even measure. The Dominion scrambled to regroup, but the humans pressed on. Each skirmish, each sacrifice, each maneuver built a legend the galaxy would speak of for centuries. Humanity had taken the first step, not just into battle, but into the hearts of every civilization in the Council. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Torres looked at the stars streaked with the glow of distant fires. She knew the battles ahead would be harder. She knew more would die. But she also knew something stronger than fear had been born: hope. Hope that humanity could survive, hope that justice could prevail, and hope that their fight would change the galaxy forever. And so, with their fleet battered but unbroken, humanity moved forward into the darkness, carrying grief, rage, and courage like a blazing banner. The first clashes were over. The first victory was theirs, but the war had only begun. And somewhere, in the cold depths of space, the Dominion's admirals whispered in disbelief. This species, this small, fragile species, will not die. The Galactic Council had never faced a crisis like this. For centuries, debates had been about trade disputes, territorial negotiations, or minor conflicts, but never about a species that could defy the impossible. Humans had not only survived the first battles against the Vayari Dominion, they had struck back with courage and precision that no one could explain. In the Grand Council chamber, ambassadors whispered urgently. The air, usually calm and ordered, now trembled with tension. The seats, once a place for reasoned debate, felt smaller as panic spread among the delegates. They will not stop, said the Thyran ambassador, his voice tight with fear. His scaled hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his seat. They have no fear. They will burn everything if we do not stop them. The Illyri ambassador, glowing softly in the chamber's light, shook her head. It is not just courage. They fight for something we cannot fully understand, something deeply human. Love, grief, justice. They are not like any race we have ever encountered. Others, like the Vayari delegate, tried to maintain pride, but even he could not hide the tremor in his voice. His fleet had been humiliated. Ships that should have crushed humanity were now scattered, destroyed, or retreating in chaos. We underestimated them, he admitted, though his words were sharp and bitter. They are impossible. The Council met in secret sessions, away from human eyes. Every plan they considered seemed inadequate. Force might work for other races, but with humans, even that was uncertain. Diplomacy had already failed. Compromise had been rejected. Words could no longer bind this species. Whispers of fear grew louder. Some ambassadors began to speak openly of evacuation, of surrender, of hiding behind ancient fleets and waiting for humanity to tire. Perhaps we can appease them, one said. Perhaps we can save ourselves before they march across the stars. But deep in their hearts, even the most cautious delegates knew the truth. Humanity was not a race to be appeased. Humanity was a force, a fire that had been awakened by grief, fed by anger, and sharpened by determination. The Council realized, slowly and with dread, that humans did not fight for glory or empire. They fought for something purer, something deeper, justice for the innocent, revenge for the fallen, and protection of everything they loved. And in that, there was no compromise. Outside the chamber, human fleets continued to move through space, carrying with them the memories of Erivo's prime, the hopes of billions, and the weight of their losses. Every victory, small or large, echoed back to the Council. Every human act of bravery, every sacrifice, reminded the delegates of a simple but terrifying truth: humanity would not yield. Inside the chamber, discussions turned into arguments, and arguments into panic. If they are not stopped, one ambassador whispered, voice tight with fear, they could destroy everything we built. Every civilization. Every alliance. They will burn us as they burned Erivo's prime. A silence followed. Many species had never considered the possibility of their own destruction. The galaxy had always believed in balance, in the idea that no single young race could ever threaten the old empires. Humanity was proving them wrong. The Thyran ambassador, usually calm and calculating, rose from his seat. His voice shook as he spoke, but his words were clear. We cannot underestimate them again. They do not act like others. They do not reason like others. They fight with their hearts as much as with their weapons. And for that, they are stronger than any of us imagined. The Ileri ambassador nodded gravely. They fight not because they have to, but because they will not allow injustice. Every loss they have suffered makes them more dangerous. Every death, every city destroyed, adds fuel to their fire. Even the Vayari delegate could no longer speak with certainty. Pride and anger fought inside him, but the cold truth was undeniable. Their empire had been humiliated. Their fleets had been broken. Their arrogance had awakened a species unlike any other in the galaxy. In that moment, the Council understood something vital and terrifying. Humanity was not just strong, not just determined. Humanity was unpredictable. They could not be bargained with. They could not be intimidated. They could not be counted on to act as any other species would. And fear spread through the chamber like wildfire. The Council had faced threats before, but none had carried the emotional weight of humanity. They had fought over power, over territory, over ideology. But humans fought for something pure, something unyielding. They fought for grief, for love, for justice, and that kind of force could not be reasoned with. Some delegates began to speak of preparing for the worst. Fleets would need to be mobilized, borders strengthened, and alliances reinforced. But even these plans felt inadequate. The Council had realized that they were no longer in control. The fire that had begun on Erevos Prime was now spreading across the stars, and nothing could extinguish it. Meanwhile, the humans themselves did not pause. They mourned their dead, yes, but they pressed forward. Every planet they left behind became a memorial. Every ship lost became a story of courage. Every battle fought became a warning to the galaxy. Humanity would march on, no matter the cost. And so the Council, filled with fear, watched helplessly. They had created a system of laws, of balance, of careful diplomacy. But this species, small and fragile as they once thought, was rewriting the rules of the galaxy with every step they took. A quiet thought spread among the older species, whispered in secret. If humanity is not stopped, they may become the strongest force the galaxy has ever known. And with that, the Council realized something even more terrifying. Humanity was only beginning. The first battles had been won. But the war, and the storm of human courage, was far from over. The fear that gripped the Council was not just fear of loss. It was fear of something far greater, the knowledge that the galaxy would never be the same again. War is never kind. It never asks if a people are ready, if their hearts are strong enough, or if the cost is worth it. Humanity had marched to war for justice, for Erevos Prime, for all they had lost, but even the bravest hearts could not escape the weight of what battle demanded. On Earth, families waited for news. Every message from the front lines carried the possibility of death. Mothers stared at empty chairs at breakfast, fathers held photographs of children they might never see again, and children learned that heroes sometimes never returned home. The grief was deep, unending, but so was the determination. Humanity had chosen this path, and they would see it through. Across the human fleets, losses mounted. Ships that had been carefully built and tested were torn apart in skirmishes. Pilots who had trained for years were cut down in seconds. Engineers working to repair damaged vessels faced the constant threat of explosions, vacuum, and fire. Yet every human, in every ship, on every station, continued to fight. They could not afford to stop. Their cause demanded persistence. On the bridge of the Valiant, Lieutenant Mara Chen held the hands of her crew as alarms blared. The ship had taken hits that would have destroyed larger fleets. Sparks flew, hull plates twisted, and oxygen systems failed. But Mara refused to abandon her post. She whispered to her soldiers, "We survive. For them. For Earth. For every home they tried to burn." Below decks, medics worked tirelessly. They carried wounded comrades from torn corridors, applied bandages with trembling hands, and prayed silently as explosions shook the ship. Every life saved felt like a small victory against the terrible tide of war. Every life lost tore at the crew's hearts, yet they pressed on, whispering names of the fallen as they returned to their posts. Even in the colonies, the war's price was clear. Families sent what little they had to support the front lines: supplies, fuel, old weapons, messages of love. In quiet homes, children crafted small tokens of courage, drawings, and letters to the soldiers fighting far away. Humanity's entire society became part of the war effort, each loss echoing in every home. Yet, despite the sorrow, something remarkable happened. Each act of sacrifice inspired others. Every fallen soldier became a story of courage. Every destroyed ship became a rallying cry. Humanity's pain fueled their resolve, sharpening their will like a blade honed by fire. In the outer colonies, Captain Elias Corps led a fleet of battered ships against a Dominion stronghold. His fleet was smaller than the enemy's, and supplies were low. Still, he pressed forward. During one engagement, a young pilot named Taro fell, his ship struck by enemy fire. Corps watched him drift into the void, helmet shattered, eyes wide with courage. He clenched his fist and whispered, "We will not stop. Your sacrifice is not in vain." Taro's death, and the countless others, became part of humanity's story. Each loss, though tragic, became a symbol of their unbreakable spirit. Stories spread among the fleets, how soldiers carried their dead comrades, how engineers repaired ships with hands scorched by fire, how civilians on distant worlds refused to hide from the war even when danger loomed. Humanity's courage became legendary in ways even the oldest alien empires could not comprehend. The Veari Dominion, watching these human acts of bravery, grew increasingly frustrated. They had expected fear, surrender, and chaos, but instead, humans fought harder when cornered, pressed forward when odds were impossible, and inspired each other in ways that defied logic. Every loss seemed to multiply their courage, every casualty sharpened their determination. On Earth, the Council of Leaders convened daily. They mourned their losses but celebrated their victories. They acknowledged the terrible cost. They knew that each ship lost, each life taken, was a debt humanity would carry forever. And yet, they also knew that the alternative, doing nothing, would have been far worse. Humanity had paid the price willingly because justice demanded it. The human fleets, though battered, moved forward like a living wave. They learned from every encounter, adapted with every challenge, and carried the memory of the fallen in every maneuver. In the quiet moments between battles, sailors wrote letters, prayed, and whispered the names of those lost, making sure that none were forgotten. Their grief became a guiding force, their sorrow transformed into determination. And through it all, humanity endured. The galaxy began to take notice, not just of their strength, but of their humanity. Alien observers marveled at the way humans cared for one another, even amidst destruction. They spoke of courage born from love, of determination carved from grief, and of hope that could not be extinguished. For humanity, war was not about glory. It was about honor, justice, and survival. Each death was mourned, each victory celebrated, and every soul remembered. And in that remembrance, humanity's spirit grew stronger, forging a force that would soon shake the very foundations of the Dominion. The price of war was immense. Humanity knew this. They felt it in every empty chair, every lost friend, every silent colony. But they also knew that this price was worth paying. For every life lost, they fought for 10 more. For every city burned, they rebuilt with courage. For every tear shed, they marched forward with unyielding resolve. And so, as human fleets continued their march into the stars, carrying grief, courage, and hope alike, the galaxy began to understand one simple truth. The heart of humanity was a force no power, no empire, and no weapon could ever destroy. War had taken much from them. But it had given the galaxy something far greater, the unbreakable, relentless spirit of humanity. Human fleets had grown tired, battered, and small in comparison to the Dominion's vast armadas. Yet, something in their hearts burned brighter than ever. They had lost so much, friends, comrades, ships, and colonies, but every loss had become fuel for their courage. Every sacrifice whispered a promise: humanity would not stop. Humanity would not kneel. Captain Elena Torres of the flagship Resolute studied the stars. Before her lay the Dominion's heartworld, a massive planet surrounded by hundreds of warships. She knew the battle ahead could be humanity's last. Entire fleets had already been lost, and every maneuver risked lives beyond measure. But she also knew something else. The Dominion's arrogance was their greatest weakness. They believed humans could be crushed like insects. They had no idea what they were facing. "Prepare for full engagement," she ordered. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glimmered with fire. "Today, we fight not just for Arrivo's Prime, not just for the fallen, but for every human in the galaxy. We fight for our future." On the decks of other ships, soldiers gripped weapons tightly. Pilots ran pre-flight checks on battered fighters. Engineers worked tirelessly, welding, repairing, and praying that their efforts would be enough. Every crew member understood the cost. Every human knew that the coming battle could claim them all. Yet none hesitated. The first shots were fired. Dominion ships unleashed a torrent of laser fire, tearing through the void. Explosions lit the darkness, and the Resolute shook violently as its shields took the first hits. But humans responded with strategy, precision, and courage that confounded the enemy. Smaller vessels swarmed to strike weak points, fighters darted between enemy lines, and coordinated volleys tore into Dominion ships. In the heat of battle, stories of bravery multiplied. Lieutenant Mara Chen piloted her fighter through a storm of enemy fire to protect a damaged human cruiser, deflecting lasers with daring maneuvers that seemed impossible. She risked her life to save hundreds, shouting over comms, "No one dies today while I'm flying." On the Valiant, Captain Elias Kaur led a boarding team onto a Dominion vessel. The enemy expected surrender, yet the humans charged through corridors filled with chaos, overcoming soldiers far stronger and larger than themselves. They fought with every ounce of strength, every lesson learned from loss and grief, until they seized control. The Dominion could not comprehend it. Their technology was superior, their numbers overwhelming, but humans fought like nothing they had ever seen. They fought with heart, with passion, with grief, and with hope. Every strike carried a story of loss. Every act of courage became a symbol of resistance. As the battle raged, the tides began to shift. Human fleets, small but unyielding, pierced through the Dominion's defenses. Ships once cornered broke free and struck at critical points. Engineers discovered ways to exploit enemy vulnerabilities. Pilots, inspired by fallen comrades, took risks no one else would dare. Slowly, steadily, humanity clawed its way into the heart of the Dominion's fleet. On Earth, transmissions from the front lines were broadcast to billions. Families watched in awe, tears streaming, as humans turned the tide against impossible odds. Children clutched one another, whispering prayers, hoping their parents were among the brave. Mothers and fathers wept, pride and sorrow mixed in their hearts, as every victory came at a terrible cost. In the council chamber, whispers turned to alarm. The Thyran ambassador, usually composed, banged his fists against the edge of his seat. "They cannot be stopped," he shouted. "They are destroying everything in their path. They are unstoppable." Even the Illyri ambassador, who had once admired humanity from afar, could not hide her astonishment. "This is not just courage," she admitted. "This is something else entirely. They are fire made flesh. And they are walking among the stars." The Dominion tried to regroup, but the humans anticipated their every move. Using knowledge gained from earlier battles, they outmaneuvered the enemy, striking with surgical precision. Every loss the Dominion inflicted on humans was repaid tenfold. Every human casualty became a rallying cry that fueled the fleet's determination. As the battle reached its climax, Captain Torres stared at the Dominion flagship, massive and imposing, its weapons glowing with deadly energy. Her heart was heavy with grief for all the lives lost, but her resolve was unshakable. "Today," she said softly, "we show the galaxy that humanity does not kneel. Today, we fight for our fallen. Today, we march for the future." A coordinated human strike hit the Dominion flagship. Explosions rocked the vessel. Fires spread across its hull. Alien soldiers scrambled as humans stormed the ship, taking control inch by inch. And then, as the flagship began to collapse, a ripple of hope spread through every human vessel. They had broken the heart of the Dominion fleet. The enemy retreated in confusion and fear, and for the first time, humans felt the taste of victory, bitter, costly, but undeniably theirs. The battle had not ended all war, but it had proven something essential. No empire, no matter how vast, could crush the human spirit. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Torres exhaled slowly, tears mingling with sweat and grime. Her crew cheered quietly, exhausted but alive. They had paid the price, they had lost too many, but they had survived. And survival had brought them closer to victory than anyone could have imagined. The galaxy had seen it, the courage, the sacrifice, the unbreakable will of humanity. The Council trembled in fear, the Dominion reeled in shock, and humans themselves understood something eternal. They were no longer the small species that the galaxy had underestimated. They were a force of nature. They were unstoppable. And their march to justice, once begun, would not end until humanity had claimed its place among the stars. The battlefield was quiet at last, though the silence carried the weight of countless lives lost. Human fleets drifted among the stars, battered, scarred, but unbroken. Fires still burned on the remnants of Dominion ships, a stark reminder of the cost of war. Humanity had marched to war and endured horrors beyond imagination, but now, victory was within reach. Captain Elena Torres stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the horizon of space. The Dominion heartworld lay before them, its defenses shattered, its fleets in retreat. Millions of human voices, though weary, were united in one thought. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now they had proven themselves. The Council watched from afar, unable to fully comprehend the force that humanity had become. The Thyran ambassador whispered, voice tight with disbelief, They are not just survivors. They are unstoppable. Even the Illyri ambassador, who had once admired human courage, could not hide the awe in her eyes. Across human fleets, cheers mixed with quiet sobs. Soldiers knelt, remembering fallen comrades. Pilots whispered the names of those who had sacrificed themselves in the heat of battle. Engineers and medics, exhausted beyond words, shared quiet smiles, knowing that their toil had saved countless lives. Humanity's triumph was born of grief and courage intertwined. Captain Torres knew that the battle was not just won with weapons. It was won with heart. Every decision, every sacrifice, every story of bravery had carved this victory. Humanity had faced the impossible and emerged not only alive but stronger, more united than ever. In orbit above the Dominion heartworld, humans prepared for a final demonstration, not of conquest, but of justice. Messages were broadcast across the galaxy, a declaration of resolve, a promise that humanity would never forget, never bow, and never allow tyranny to flourish unchecked. We do not march to conquer, Captain Torres announced, her voice steady but resonant, reaching millions of ears across human space. We do not seek revenge. We march to protect, to honor the fallen, and to ensure that no voice cries unheard. Let all who see this know, humanity is awake, and humanity will stand. The Dominion, weakened and humiliated, could only retreat. Their arrogance, their cruelty, had been met with something they could not comprehend: relentless courage, unwavering loyalty, and a will stronger than any weapon. For the first time, they understood that humans did not fight like others. Humans fought for something far greater than power. They fought for life, for justice, for each other. On Earth, families gathered to witness the final transmissions. Children clung to parents as the images of human fleets filled the skies. Mothers and fathers wept quietly, proud of the children who had left home and returned as heroes. Every citizen, from the smallest colony to the largest city, felt the victory as deeply as if they had fought themselves. Captain Torres walked among her crew, placing a hand on shoulders, offering quiet words of comfort and thanks. We have done what we came to do, she said. We honor those we lost by surviving. We honor them by continuing, by standing tall, and by showing the galaxy who we are. The human fleets returned home in stages, carrying their stories, their grief, and their triumph. Every star system celebrated in its own way, from quiet memorials to joyful festivals. Humanity's march to war had changed them, shaping a generation stronger, braver, and wiser than any before. Even the Council could no longer doubt them. Ambassadors whispered, debated, and finally acknowledged the truth. Humanity was no longer the species they had underestimated. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not through fear, not through power, but through courage, sacrifice, and unshakable spirit. For the Dominion, the lesson was cruel and clear. Cruelty and arrogance could not crush a species driven by love, grief, and hope. Their retreat marked the beginning of a new era, one in which humanity's name carried weight across the galaxy. On Erivo's prime, rebuilt and thriving under human guidance, children played in fields that had once burned. Trees grew where fire had raged. Cities rose from ashes, stronger and brighter than before. Humanity's triumph was not only in battle, it was in renewal, in rebuilding, in remembering and honoring the fallen while shaping a better future. Captain Torres stood on the rebuilt platform overlooking the planet. She thought of the thousands who had given their lives. She thought of every family torn apart, every city burned, every sacrifice made in the darkness. And yet, in their memory, she felt hope. A deep, enduring hope. Humanity marches forward, she whispered to herself. And we will never stop. Across the galaxy, stories of humanity's courage spread. Young species spoke of them with reverence. Older empires whispered their names with fear and respect. Songs, tales, and legends of human bravery began to echo in every corner of space. Humanity had done more than survive. They had inspired, they had awed, and they had rewritten the rules of the galaxy. The war was over, but the legacy had just begun. Humanity had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, not just through force, but through heart. Their march had proven a simple truth: when a species fights for justice, love, and life itself, nothing can stand in their way. And so, humanity stood tall among the stars, unbroken, unyielding, and eternal. The galaxy had expected nothing, and found everything. The fire of humanity had been awakened. And it would never burn out.